So I think this is part 3. Let's roll those annoying ads. Oh! A new D&D cookbook! Okay, which stream do I have? Oh, so hot. Ba-da. Ba-da-da-da. Get up. I think it says there's still like 3 more minutes. The autographed copy of the book is for sale. It's here on the eBays. Why am I short? Don't answer that. Some red alerts should be on now. some guy to put fucking. Ba-da, ba-da, bum, bum, ba-da, bum, bum. Yeah. I'd like to thank Dusk for kind of giving me a direction on how to get Kel as my bot there. Hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hello.
Fucking sounds. Fuses to work. Hello. Hello. Not at all. And my microphone is still cutting off, so easy. Bum bum ba-dum, bum bum ba-dum, bum bum ba-dum, bum 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 ba-dum, bum 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 ba-dum, bum bum. Bada bum 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 bitty bitty bum bum bitty bitty bum bum bitty bitty bum. Yeah. Oh, this isn't a singing string. Ah. Oh my. Ow. Anyway, if you watch the VOD on this, over there in chat, on my head, I post the link for my eBay site, where you can now purchase one of 10 autographed paperbacks or one of 5 autographed hardbacks of As Told by the Wolf Storyteller. I feel really lame advertising myself. I'd rather other people advertise for me, but it is what it is. And if you don't recall, I also have the affiliate links for. Oh, motherfucker. I cannot was here. How am I supposed to catch them if I don't know they're there? I was really wanting a Lycan Rock. Reasons. I've got 3 bottles of water, so I definitely be hydrated tonight. Like I'm gonna have to take a long break to dehydrate. Uh, snacked up some sausage strips. They were. I really do hope that my fan will not be blaringly on the microphone. Try to keep the microphone out of the air current as much as possible and still be able to hear me, because It is just damn hot. Did not change. Oh, did more tinkering design work. I realized that, well, that window isn't actually square. So I really had to compress that loop. If I was a 3D model, I'll try to show you the store. I have, designed most of the store area. And if you see the TARDIS back, that actually opens up in the back and goes to this building, which is the coffee shop and general storage area for the books. But in there, it also has the stairs. What's storage, stairs that go upstairs and downstairs. It's got the coffee shop in the front, which is not that much deeper than my office space. I've gone through and designed this entire round. I haven't done much on the other side yet. But the bookstore, I've actually designed a lot of it. I have absolutely no opportunity to show it. But anyway. It is Thursday, so we're back in Sherlock Holmes again. After at least 2 weeks of having wanted to make sure I read tonight, and I don't know how far we're going to get into it since we're starting at chapter 9, and I really haven't seen how much there's left. Chapter 9. Really picking up. Man, so Anyway, the last page, 688, 655, so 33 pages. We can probably cover that tonight, I think. And then we'll finish up with this book. Then I'll have to figure out which is the next in the series, and then we'll start reading that. And then make sure I get the timeline done. This done too. But anyway, we're at 9 minutes after the hour. Whichever hour you may be in. So let's go ahead and go over this. Shooting. And of course, I sent some spout capture instead of doing straight YouTube Studio. There. Sure. Switch over. There we go. So yeah. About has been, I guess it's been using less. I have to tell. Because I'm not that tech sound. Sound alerts are off. Blurp is off. Coffee and thermal alerts are still going, but I don't think they do sound. So, yeah. Let's get into the book, shall we? So this is the Sign of Four, Chapter 9, A Break in the Chain. It was late afternoon before I awoke, strengthened and refreshed. Sherlock Holmes still sat exactly as I had left him, save that he had been laid beside his violin and was deep in a book. He looked across at me as I restirred, and I noticed that his face was dark and troubled. "You have slept soundly," he said. "I feared that our talk would wake you." "I heard nothing," I answered. "Have you had fresh news, then?" "Unfortunately, no. I confess that I am surprised and disappointed. I expected something definite by this time. Wiggins has just been up to report. He says that no trace can be found of the watch. It is a provoking check, for every hour is of importance." "Can I do anything? I'm perfectly fresh now, and quite ready for another night's outing." "No, there is nothing to do. We can only wait, and if yourselves a message might come in our absence, and delay be caused. You can do what you will, but I must remain on guard." "Then I shall run over to Camberwell and call upon Mrs. Cecil Forrester. She asked me to yesterday." "On Miss Cecil Forrester," asked Holmes with a twinkle in his eye. "Of course, on Miss Morstan as well. They were anxious to hear what happened." "I could not tell them too much," said Holmes. "Women are never to be entirely trusted. Not the best of them." I did not pause to argue over this atrocious comment. "I shall be back in an hour or two," I remarked. "All right. Good luck. But I say, if you're crossing the water, you may as well return Toby, for I don't think it is at all likely that you will have any use for him." I took a mongrel accordingly, and left him, together with the half-sovereign, at the naturalist's in Pension Lane. At Camberwell I found Miss Morstan a little weary after her night's adventures, but very eager to hear the news. Miss Forrester, too, was full of curiosity. I told them all that we had done, suppressing, however, the more dreadful parts of the tragedy. Thus, although I spoke of Miss Sholto's death, I said nothing of the exact manner and method of it. With all my omissions, however, there was enough to startle and amaze them. "It is a romance!" cried Mrs. Forrester. "An injured lady, 500,000 in treasure, a black cannibal, and a wooden-legged ruffian. They take the place of the conventional dragon or wicked earl. And 2 knight-errants to the rescue," added Miss Morstan, with a bright glance at me. "Why, Mary, your fortune depends upon this issue of a search. I don't think that you are nearly excited enough. Just imagine what it must be so rich, and to have the world at your feet." It sent a little thrill of joy to my heart to notice that she showed no sign of elation at the prospect. On the contrary, she gave a toss of her proud head, as though the matter were one in which she took small interest. It is from Mr. Thaddeus Sholto that I am anxious, she said. Nothing else is of any consequence, but I think that he has behaved most kindly and honorably throughout. It is our duty to clear him of this
The
dreadful
restricted section is a cautionary tale all in its own rights.
and unfounded change. It was evening before I left Camberwell, and it was quite dark by the time I had reached home. My companion's book and pipe lay by his chair, but he had disappeared. I looked about in the hope of seeing a note, but there was no note. Hi, Sam. Subscribe. 3 months. Wow. I suppose that Mrs. Sherlock Holmes has gone out, I said to Miss Hudson as she came up to lower the blinds. No, sir. He has gone to his room, sir. Do you know, sir, sinking her voice in an impressive manner, I'm afraid for his health. Why so, Miss Hudson? Oh, he's that strange, sir. After you was gone, he walked up and down, until I was weary of the sound of his footsteps. Then I heard him talking to himself and muttering, and every time the bell rang out, he came to the stairhead with, "What was that, Miss Hudson?" And now he has slammed off into his room, but I can hear him walking the same as ever. I hope he's not going to be ill, sir. I ventured to say something to him about cooling medicine, but he turned an air to me, sir, and such a look that I don't know however I got out of the room. I don't think that you have any cause to be uneasy, Miss Hudson, I answered. I have seen him like this before. He has some small matter upon his mind which makes him restless. I tried to speak lightly of our worthy landlady, but I was myself somewhat uneasy when, through the long night, I still from time to time heard a dull sound of his tread. I knew how his keen spirit was chafing against this involuntary inaction. At breakfast time he looked worn and haggard, with a little fleck of feverish colour upon either cheek. "You're knocking yourself out, old man," I remarked, "and I heard you marching about in the night." "No, I could not sleep," he answered. "This infernal problem is consuming me. It is too much to be balked over in an obstacle, when all else has been overcome. I know the men that launch everything, and yet I can get no news. I have set other agencies at work, and used every means at my disposal. The whole river has been searched on either side, but there is no news, nor has Mrs. Smith heard of her husband. I shall come to the conclusion soon that they have scuffled the craft. But there are objections to that. Could it have gone upriver? I have considered that possibility too, and there is a search party who will work up as far as Richmond. If no news comes today, I shall start off myself tomorrow, and go for the men rather than the boat. Surely, we shall hear something. We did not, however. Not a word came to either of us from Wiggins or from the other agencies. There were articles in most of the papers upon the Norwood tragedy. They all appeared to be rather hostile to the unfortunate Thaddeus Sholto. No fresh details were to be found, however, in any of them, save that an inquest was to be held upon the following day. I walked over to Camberwell in the evening to report our ill success to the ladies, and on my return I found Holmes dejected and somewhat morose. He would hardly reply to my questions, and busied himself all the evening in an obtrusive chemical analysis which involved much heating of retorts and distilling of vapours, ending at last in a smell which fairly drove me out of the apartment. Up to the small hours of the morning I could hear the clinking of his test tubes, which told me that he was still engaged in his malodorous experiment. In the early dawn I woke with a start. and was surprised to find him standing by my bedside, clad in a rude sailor dress with a peak coat and a coarse red scarf around his neck. "I'm off down to the river, Watson," he said. "I've been turning it over in my mind, and I can only see one way out of it. It is worth trying, at all events." "Surely I can come with you, then," said I. "No. You can be much more useful if you would remain here as my representative. I am loth to go, for it is quite to the cards that some message may come during the day. Though Wiggins was despondent about it last night. I want you to open all notes and telegrams, and to act on your own judgment if any news should come. Can I rely on you?" "Most certainly." "I'm afraid that you will not be able to wire to me, for I can hardly tell yet where I may find myself. If I am in luck, however, I may not be gone so very long. I shall have news of some sort or other before I get back." I heard nothing from him from breakfast time. On opening the Standard, however, I found that there was a fresh allusion to the business. "With reference to the Upper Norwood tragedy," it remarked, "we have reason to believe that the matter promises to be even more complex and mysterious than was originally supposed. Fresh evidence has shown that it is quite impossible that Mr. Thaddeus Sholto could have been in any way concerned in the matter. He and the housekeeper, Mrs. Burnstone, were both released yesterday evening. It is believed, however, that the police have a clue as to the real culprit, and that it was prosecuted by Mr. Athelney Jones of Scotland Yard, with all his well-known energy and sagacity. Further arrests may be expected at any moment." That is satisfactory so far as it goes, I thought. Friend Sholto is safe at any rate. I wonder what the fresh clue may be, though it seems to be stereotyped form from whichever police made the blunder. I tossed the paper down on the table, but at that moment my eye caught an advertisement in the agony column. It ran this way: "Lost. Whereas Mordecai Smith, boatman, and his son Jim left Smith's Wharf at or about 3 o'clock on Tuesday morning with the steam launch Aurora. Black with 2 red stripes, funnel black with a white band. The sum of £5 will be paid to anyone who can give information to Mrs. Smith at Smith's Wharf or at 221B Baker Street as to the whereabouts of the said Mordecai Smith and at the launch Aurora." This was clearly Holmes' doing. The Baker Street address was proof enough of that. It struck me as rather ingenious because it read that the fugitives, without their seeing it, as more than natural anxiety for wife for her missing husband. It was a long day. Every time that a knock came at the door or a sharp step passed in the street, I imagined that it was either Holmes returning or an answer to his advertisement. I tried to read, but my thoughts would wander oft to our strange quest and to the ill-assorted and villainous pair whom we were pursuing. Could there be, I wondered, some radical flaw in my companion's reasoning? Might he not be suffering from some strange self-deception? Was it not possible that his nimble and speculative mind had built up a wild theory upon faulty premises? I had never known him to be wrong, and yet the keenest reasoner may occasionally be deceived. He was likely, I thought, to fall into error through the over-refinement of his logic. His preference for a subtle and bizarre explanation when a plainer and more commonplace one may lay ready at his hand. Yet, on the other hand, I had myself seen the evidence, and I had heard the reasons for his seductions. When I looked back on the long cabin of curious circumstances, many of them trivial in themselves, but all tending in the same direction. I could not disguise from myself the fact that if Holmes' explanation were incorrect, and the true theory must be equally outre and startling. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there was a loud peal at the bell. The authoritative voice in the hall, and, to surprise, no less the person of Mr. Athenley Jones, was shown up to me. Very different he was, however, from the brusque and masterful professor of common sense who had taken over the case so confidently at North Apple. His expression was downcast, and his bearing meek and even apologetic. "Good day, sir, good day," he said. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes is out, I understand." "Yes, and I cannot be sure when he will be back. But perhaps you would care to wait. Take that chair and try one of these cigars." "Thank you. I don't mind if I do," he said, mopping his face with a red bandana handkerchief. "And a whiskey and soda." "Oh, half a glass. It is very hot for this time of year, and I have had no good deal of worry to try me. You know my theory about this Norwood case?" "I remember that you had expressed one." "Well, I have been obliged to reconsider it. I had my net drawn tightly around Mr. Sholto, so when pop he went to the hole in the middle of it, he was able to prove an alibi which could not be shaken. From the time that he left his brother's room, he never got out of sight of someone or another, so it could not be he who climbed over roofs and through trap doors. It's a very dark case, and my professional credit is at stake. I should be very glad of your assistance." "We all need help sometimes," I said. "Your friend Sherlock Holmes is a wonderful man, sir," he said in a husky and confidential tone. "He's a man who is not to be beat. I have known that young man go into a good many cases, but I never saw the case yet he could not throw a little light upon. He is irregular in his methods, and a little quick perhaps in jumping into theories, but on the whole, I think he would have made the most promising officer, and I don't care who knows it. I have had to wire from him this morning, by which I understand that he has got some clue to the Sholto business. Here's the message." He took out a telegram out of his pocket and handed it to me. It was dated from Poplar at 12 o'clock. "Go to Baker 133 Street at once," he said. "If I have not returned, wait for me. I am close on the track of the Sholto gang. You can come with us tonight if you want to be in at the finish." "This sounds well. He has evidently picked up the scent again," I said. "And then he has been at fault, too," exclaimed James, with evident satisfaction. "Even the best of us are thrown off sometimes. Of course, this may prove to be a false alarm, but it is my duty as an officer of the law to allow no chance to slip. But there is someone at the door. Perhaps this is the scene." A heavy step was heard ascending the stair, with a great wheezing and rattling upon, as a man who was sorely put out for his breath. Once or twice he stopped, as though the climb were too much for him, but at last he made his way to our door and entered. His appearance corresponded to the sounds which we had heard. He was a middle-aged man, clad in seafaring garb, with an old pea-jacket buttoned up to his throat. His back was bowed, his knees were shaky, and his breathing was painfully asthmatic. As he leaned upon the thick oaken cudgel, his shoulders heaved in an effort to draw in the air of his lungs. He had a colored scarf round his chin, and I could see little of the face, save for a pair of keen dark eyes, overhung by bushy white eyebrows and long gray side whiskers. Altogether, he gave me the impression of a respectable master mariner who had fallen into years of poverty. "What is it, my man?" I asked. He looks about him in the slow, methodical fashion of old age. "Is Mr. Sherlock Holmes here?" said he. "No, but I am acting for him. You can tell me if any message you have for him." "It was to tell him himself I was to tell it," he said. "But I tell you, I am acting as him. What is this Mordecai Smith's boat?" "Yes, I knows well where it is, and I knows where the men he is after are, and I knows where the treasure is. I knows all about it." "Tell me then, and I shall let him know." "It was to him I was to tell it," he repeated, said the old petulant, obstinate man. "Well, you must wait for him." "No, no, I ain't going to lose the whole day to please no one. If Mr. Holmes ain't here, then Mr. Holmes must find it on his own for himself. I don't care about the look of either of you, and I won't tell a word." He shuffled towards the door, but old Thinmy Jones got in front of him. "Wait a bit, my friend," he said. "You have important information, and you must not walk off. We shall keep you whether you like it or not, until our friend returns." The old man made a little run towards the door, but as Othenmy Jones put his broad back up against it, he recognized the uselessness of his resistance. "Pretty sort of treatment, this," he cried, stamping his stick. "I come here to see a gentleman, and you two, who I never saw in my life, seize me and treat me in this fashion." "You will be none the worse," I said. "We shall recompense you for your loss of your time. Sit over here on the sofa, and you will not have long to wait." He came across sullenly enough and seated himself with his face resting on his hands. Jones and I resumed our cigars and our talk. Suddenly, however, Holmes's voice broke out upon us. "I think you might offer me a cigar, too," he said. We both started in our chairs. There was Holmes sitting close to us with an air of quiet amusement. "Holmes!" I exclaimed. "You here? But where is the old man?" "Here's the old man," he said, holding out a heap of white hair. "Here he is, wig, whiskers, eyebrows, and all. I thought my disguise was fairly well, and I hardly expected that it would stand that test." "Oh, you rogue!" cried Jones, highly delighted. "You would have made an actor, and a rare one. You had the proper workhouse cough, and those weak legs of yours are worth £10 a week. I thought I knew the glint of your eye, though. You didn't get away from us so easily, you see." "I've been working to get that up all night," he said, lighting a cigar. "You see, a good many of the criminal class begin to know me, especially since our friend here took to publishing some of my many cases. So I can only go out on the warpath under some simple disguise like this. You got my wire?" "Yes, that is what brought me here." "It has come all to nothing. I've had to release 2 of my prisoners, and there is no evidence against the other 2. Never mind, we shall give you the 2 others in the place of them. But you must put yourself under my orders. You are welcome to all of the official credits, but you must act on the lines that I write out. Is that agreed?" "Entirely, if you will help me to the men." "Well then, in the first case, I shall want a fast police boat, a steam launch, to be at the Westminster Stairs at 7 o'clock." "That is easily managed. There's always one about there, but I can step across the road and telephone to make sure." "Then I shall want 2 staunch men in case of resistance. There will be 2 or 3 in the boat. What else? When we secure the men, we shall get them the treasure. I think that it would be a pleasure to my friend here to take the box round to the young lady to whom half of it rightfully belongs. Let her be the first to open it. Eh, Watson? It would be a great pleasure to me. Rather irregular proceedings, said Jones, shaking his head. However, the whole thing is irregular, and I suppose we must wink at it. Treasure must afterwards be handed over to the authorities under the official investigation. Certainly, that is easily managed. One other point. I'd like so much to have few details of the matter from the lips of Jonathan Small himself. You know, I like to work the details out of my cases. There's no objection to my having the unofficial interview with him, either here in my rooms or elsewhere, as long as he's sufficiently guarded. Well, you are the master of the situation. I have no proof yet of the existence of this Jonathan Small. However, if you can catch him, I don't see how I can refuse you an interview. That is understood, then. Perfectly. Is there anything else? Only that I insist upon your dining with us. It will be ready in half an hour. I have oysters and a brace of grouse, and something a little choice in the white wines. Watson, have you never recognized my merits as a housekeeper? That was the end of chapter 9. And it's strange, it played the sound alert for the... So it's not playing all my regular sound alerts, which is just wonky. Self-cool down some, blocking, subsequently blocking it from getting to me. Yeah, maybe. What does it say the ads are already? Oh, it's doing the screen ads with some commercial ads. Ouch. Oh, stretches and hydrates in. Oh, wow. 3 months. That's cool. Okay. So it's not saying any ads are going right now. I guess it's safe to be. I didn't even get to trigger the ads that time. It's worth going last time. Almost done with my first bottle. Anyway. Chapter 10. The End of the Islander. Our meal was a merry one. Holmes could talk exceedingly well when he chose, and that night he did choose. He appeared to be in a state of nervous exaltation. I never have known him to be so brilliant. He spoke on a quick succession of subjects, on miracle plays, on medieval pottery, of Stradivarius violins, on Buddhism of Ceylon, and on the warships of the future. handling each as though he had made a special study of it. His bright humor marked the reaction from his black depression of the preceding days. Although Jones proved to be a sociable soul in his hours of relaxation, and faced his dinner with the air of a bon vivant. For myself, I was elated at the thought that we were nearing the end of the task, and I got something in Holmes's gaiety. None of us alluded during dinner to the cause which had brought us together. When the cloth was cleared, Holmes glanced at his watch and filled up 3 glasses with port. "One bumper," he said, "on the success of our little expedition. And now it is high time we were off. You have a pistol, Watson?" "I have my old Silver's revolver in my desk." "You had best take it, then. It is well to be prepared. I see that the cab is at the door. I ordered it for 6:30. It was little past 7 before we reached Westminster Wharf and found our launch waiting for us. Holmes eyed it critically. "Is there anything to mark it as a police boat?" "Yes, that green lamp on the side." "Then take it off." A small change was made, and we stepped on board. The ropes were cast off. Jones, Holmes, and I sat at the stern. There was one man at the rudder, one to attend the engines, and 2 burly police inspectors forward. "Where to?" asked Jones. "To the tower. Told him to stop opposite Jackson's yard." Our craft was evidently a very fast one. We shot past the long lines of loaded barges as though they were stationary. Holmes smiled with satisfaction as we overhauled a river steamer and left her behind us. "We ought to be able to catch anything on the river," he said. "Oh, hardly that, but there are not many launches to beat us." "We shall have to catch the Aurora, and she has a name for being a tickler. I will tell you how the land lies, Watson. You recollect how annoyed I was at being balked at by so small a thing?" "Yes." "Well, I gave my mind a thorough rest by plunging into a chemical analysis. One of the greatest statesmen said that a change of work is the best rest. So it is. When I succeeded in dissolving the hydrocarbon which I was at work at, I came back to the problem of the sholtos, and though the whole matter was again. The boys had been up the river and down the river without result. The launch was not at any landing stage or wharf, nor had it been returned. Yet it could have hardly been scuttled to hide traces. Through that, I remained a possible hypothesis if all else failed. I knew that this man Small had a certain degree and low conjuncture of delicate finesse. It is usually a product of higher education. Then I reflected that since he had certainly been in London for some time, as we had evidence of remaining in continual watch of the Parliamentary Lodge, he could hardly leave at a moment's notice. But he would need a little time, if it were only a day, to arrange his affairs. That was a balance of probability at any rate. "It seems to me a little weak," I said. "It is more probable that he had arranged his affairs before he ever set out upon his expedition." "No, I hardly think so. This lair of his would be too valuable a retreat in case of need for him to give up until he was sure that he could do without it. But a second consideration struck me. Jonathan Small must have felt that he had top-coated. Jonathan Small must have felt that the particular appearance of his companion, however much he may have top-coated him, would give rise to gossip. So possibly be associated with an old tragedy. He was quite sharp enough to see that. They had started from their headquarters under cover of darkness, and he would have wished to get back before it was broad daylight. Now it was past 3 o'clock, according to Mrs. Smith, when they got to the boat. Could be quite bright, and people would be about an hour or so. Therefore, I argued that they could not go very far. They paid Smith well to hold his tongue and reserved his lunch for the final escape, and hurried to their lodgings with the treasure box. In a couple of nights, when they had time to see what the papers were, whether there was any suspicion, they would make their way under cover of darkness to some ship, Gravesend, or in the Downs, for no doubt they had already arranged for the passages to America, colonies. A launch? They could not have taken that to their lodgings. Quite so. I argued that the launch must be no great way off, in spite of its invisibility. I then put myself in the place of Small, looked at it as a man of his capacity. He would probably consider that to send back the launch or to keep it at a wharf would make pursuit easy if the police did happen to get on its track. How, then, could he conceal the launch and yet have her at the hand wanted? I considered what I should do myself if I were in his shoes. I could only think of one way of doing it. I might hand the launch over to some boat builder or ship repairer, with directions to make a trifling change in her. She would then be removed from the shed or the yard, and be so effectually concealed, while at the same time I could have her a few hours' notice. That does seem simple enough. It is just these very simple things which are extremely liable to be overlooked. However, I determined to act on the idea. I started at once in this harmless seaman's rig, and inquired at all the yards down the river. I drew blank at 15, but at the 16th, Jacobson's, I learned that the Aurora had been handed over to them 2 days ago with the wooden-legged man. Some trivial directions as to her rudder. Ain't not messes with a rudder, said the foreman. There she lies with the red streaks. At the moment, who should come down but Mordecai Smith, the missing owner, who is rather the worse for liquor. I should not, of course, have known him, but he bellowed out his name and his lunch was the name of his lunch. I want it tonight at 8 o'clock, he said. 8 o'clock sharp, mind, for I have two gentlemen who won't be keep waiting. They had evidently paid him well, for he was very flush with money, chuckling shillings about to the men. I followed him for some distance, but he subsided into an alehouse, so I went back to the yard, and, happening to pick up one of the boys on the way, I stationed him at the front sentry of the launch. He is to stand at the water's edge and wave his handkerchief to us when they start. We shall be lying in the stream. It shall be a strange thing if we do not take men, treasure, and all. You planned it all very well and neat, whether they are the right men or not, said Jones. But if the affair were in my hands, I should have already had a body of police in Jacobson's yard and arrested them when they came down. Which would have been never. This man Small is a pretty shrewd fellow. He would send a scout on ahead, and if anything made him suspicious, he would lie snug for another week. But you might have snuck in Mordecai Smith to be led to the hiding place, said I. In that case, I should have wasted my day. I think that it is 100 to 1 that Smith's knowing where they live. As long as he has liquor and good pay, why should he question? They sent him messages what to do. Now I thought over every possible course. This is the best. While the conversation was proceeding, we had seen shooting a long series of bridges which spanned the Thames. As we passed the city, the last rays of the sun were gliding over the summits of St. Paul's. It was twilight before we reached the tower. That is Jacobson's yard, said Holmes, pointing at a bristle of masts and riggings on the Surrey side. Cruise gently up and down, here under cover of the string of lighters. He took a pair of night glasses from his pocket and gazed some time towards the shore. I see my sentry at his post, he remarked, but no sign of a handkerchief. Suppose we go downstream a short way and lie in wait for them, said Jones eagerly. We were all eager by this time, even the policemen and the stokers, who had been the very vague idea of what was going forward. We have no right to take anything for granted, Holmes answered. It is certainly 10 to 1 that they go for downstream. Twin God be certain. From this point we can see the entrance of the yard. They can hardly see us. It will be a clear night and plenty of light. Must stay where we are. See how folks swarm over yonder in the gaslight. They're coming from work in the yard. Dirty little rascals. But I suppose everyone has to come some little immortal spark concealed about them. You would not think it to look at them. There's no priori probability about it. Strange enigmas, man. Someone calls him a soul concealed in an animal, I suggested. Winwood Reed is very good upon the subject, said Holmes. He remarks that while the individual man is an insoluble puzzle, the aggregate becomes a mathematical certainty. You can, for example, never foretell what any one man will do, but you can say with precision what an average number will be up to. Individuals vary, but percentages remain constant. So says the statistician. But do I see a handkerchief? Surely there's a white flutter over yonder. Yes, it is our boy, I cried. I can see him plainly. And there is the Aurora, exclaimed Holmes. Going like the devil. Full speed ahead, engineer. Make after that launch with the yellow light. By heavens, I shall never forgive myself if she proves to have the heels of us. She had slipped unseen through the yard entrance and passed behind 2 of the 3 small craft, so that she had fairly got her speed up before we ever saw her. Now she was flying down the stream, near into the shore, and going at a tremendous rate. Jones looked gravely at her and shook his head. She is very fast, he said. I doubt if we shall catch her. We must catch her, cried Holmes, between his teeth. Keep it on, stokers. Make her do all she can. If we burn the boat, we must have them. We were fairly after her now. The furnaces roared and the powerful engine whizzed and clanked like a great metallic heart. Her sharp, steep prow cut through the still river water and sent 2 rolling waves to the right and left of us. With every throb of the engines, we sprang and quivered like a new living thing. One great yellow lantern in our bows threw a long, flickering tunnel of light in front of us. Right ahead, a dark blur upon the water showed where the Aurora lay, and the white swirl of foam behind her spoke of the pace at which she was going. We flashed past barges, steamers, merchant vessels, in and out, behind this one and around the other. Voices hailed us out of the darkness, and still the Aurora thundered on. And still we followed close upon her track. Pilot on, men! Pilot on! Cried Holmes, looking down into the engine room, with a fierce glow from below beating upon his eager, aquiline face. Get every pound of steam you can! I think we could gain a little, said Jones, with his eyes on the Aurora. I'm sure of it, I said. We shall be up in her in a very few minutes. At that moment, however, our evil fate would have it. A tug of 3 barges and tow blundered in between us. was only putting our helm hard down that we avoided the collision, and before we could round them and recover our way, the Aurora had gained 200 yards. She was still, however, well in our view, and the murky, uncertain twilight was settling into a clear, starlit night. Our boilers were strained against their utmost, and the frail shell vibrated and creaked with the fierce energy while she was driving us along. We had shot through the pool, past the West India docks, and down the long Deptford Reach, and up again in the rounding the Isle of Dogs. The dull blur in front of us resolved itself now clearly enough to the dainty Aurora. Jones turned our spotlight upon her so that we could plainly see the figures upon her deck. One man sat by the stern with something black between his knees, over which he stooped. Beside him lay a dark mass which looked like a Newfoundland dog. The boy held the tiller, while against the red glare of the furnace I could see the old man Smith, stripped to the waist and shoveling coals for his dear life. They may have done some doubt at first whether we were really pursuing them, but now as we followed every winding and turning which they took, we could no longer be any question about it. At Greenwich we were about 300 paces behind them. At Blackwall we could not see to have been more than 250. I have coursed many creatures in many countries during my checkered career, and never did sport give me such a wild thrill as this mad flying manhunt down the Thames. Steadily we drew in upon them, yard by yard. In the silence of the night we could hear the panting and clanking of their machinery. The man in their stern still crouched upon the deck, and his arms were moving as though that he were busy, while every now and then he would look up and measure with the glance the distance which still separated us. Nearer we came, and nearer. Jones yelled to them to stop, and were no more than 4 boats' lengths behind them, both boats flying at a tremendous pace. It was a clear reach of the river, with Barking level upon one side, and melancholy Plumstead marshes upon the other. At our hail, the men at the stern sprang up from the deck and shook 2 clenched fists at us, cursing the while in a high, cackled voice. He was a good-sized, powerful man, and as he stood poising himself with legs astride, I could see that from the thigh downwards there was but a wooden stump on his right side. At the sound of his strident, angry cries, there was a movement in the huddled bundle upon the deck. It straightened itself into a little black man, the smallest I have ever seen, with a great misshapen head and a shock of tangled, disheveled hair. Holmes had already taken down his revolver, and was whipped out mine at the sight of this savage, distorted creature. He was wrapped in some sort of dark ulster or blanket, which left only his face exposed. But the face was enough to drive a man to a sleepless night. Never have I seen the features so deeply marked with all bestiality and cruelty. His small eyes glowed and burned with a somber light, and his thick lips were writhed black with his teeth, which glistened and chattered at us with half-animal fury. "Fire if yours is at hand," said Holmes quietly. We were within a boat's length by this time, and almost within touch of our quarry. I can see the 2 of them now as they stood, the white man with his legs far apart, shrieking out curses, and the unhallowed dwarf with his hideous face and the strong yellow teeth gnashing at us in the light of the lantern. It was all well that we had clear view of him. Even as we looked, he plucked up from under his covering a short, round piece of wood, like a school ruler, and clapped it to his lips. Our pistols rang together. He whirled around and threw up his arms, and, with a kind of choking cough, fell sideways into the stream. I caught one glimpse of his venomous, menacing eyes amid the white swirl in the waters. At the same moment, the wooden-legged man threw himself upon the rudder and put it down hard. so that his boat made straight in for the southern bank, while we shot past her stern, only clearing her by a few feet. We were round after her in an instant, but she was already nearly at the bank. It was a wild and desolate place, where the moon glimmered upon a wide expanse of marshland, with pools of stagnant water and beds of decaying vegetation. That launch, with a dull thud, ran up with a mudbank, and with her brow in the air, her stern flush in the water, the fugitive sprang out, but his stump instantly sank its whole length into the sun's soil. In vain he struggled and writhed. Not one step could he possibly take either forwards or backwards. He yelled in impotent rage and kicked frantically into the mud with his other foot. But his struggles were only bored his wooden pin in deeper into the risky bank. When we brought our launch alongside, he was so firmly anchored that it was only by throwing the end of the rope over his shoulders that we were able to haul him out, and to drag him like some evil fish to our side. Two Smiths, father and son, sat sullenly in their launch, but came aboard meekly enough when commanded. The Aurora herself were hauled up and made fast to her stern. The solid iron chest of Indian workmanship stood upon the deck. This, there could be no question, was the same that had contained the ill-omened treasure of the Sholtos. There was no key, but it was of considerable weight, so we transferred it carefully to our own little cabin. As we steamed slowly upstream again, we flashed our searchlights in every direction, but there was no sign of the island. Somewhere in the dark ooze at the bottom of the Thames lie the bones of that strange visitor to our shores. "See there," said Holmes, pointing at the wooden hatchway. We were hardly quick enough with our pistols. There sure were enough, but behind we were standing struck one of those murderous darts which we knew so well. It must have whizzed between us in the instant we fired. Holmes smiled at it and shrugged his shoulders in an easy fashion. But I confess it's turned me sick to think of the horrible death which passed so close to us that night. Oh, okay. It's in chapter 10. Stretching time. 2 chapters left. You have to figure out which ones to read next. Valley of Feareth. Good to get that too. Oh, cat. Okay, let's get one. I'm actually reading this out of the William Baring Gold's collection, so I just like tracking down the original art for the sign. Oh, I'm kind of surprised I made an auto shadow for you. loud that bottle was. My fireplace. That nice audio. Here's my rooms. It's time without it. Story. Chapter 11. The Great Agra Treasure. Our captive sat in the cabin opposite to the iron box which he had done so much and waited so long to gain. He was a sunburned, reckless-eyed fellow, with a network of lines and wrinkles all over his mahogany features, which told of a hard, open-air life. There was a singular prominence about his bearded chin which marked a man who was not to be easily turned from his purpose. His age may have been 50 or thereabouts, for his black curly hair was thickly shot with grey. His face was not an unpleasing one, though his heavy brows and aggressive chin gave him, as I had lately seen, a terrible expression when moved to anger. He now sat with his hands cuffed upon his lap, and his head sunk upon his breast. He looked with the keen, twinkling eyes at the box, which had been the cause of his ill doings. It seemed to me that there was more sorrow than anger in his rigid, contained countenance. Once he looked up at me with a gleam of something like humor in his eyes. "Well, Jonathan Small," said Holmes, lighting a cigar, "I'm sorry that it had to come to this." "And so am I, sir," he answered frankly. "I don't believe that I can swing over the job. I give you my word on the book that I never raised hand against Mr. Sholto. It was that little hellhound Tonga who shot his cursed darts into him. I had no part in it, sir. I was as grieved as if it had been my own blood relation. I welted the little devil with the sack end of a rope for it. But it was done, and it not undo it. Have a cigar," said Holmes, "and you had best take a pull out of my flask, for you are very wet. How could you expect so small and weak a man as this blackfellow to overpower Mr. Sholto and hold him while you were climbing the rope? You seem to know as much about it as if you were there, sir. The truth is that I had hoped to find the room clear. I knew the habits of the house pretty well, and it was the same time Mr. Sholto usually went down to his supper. I shall make no secret of the business. The best defense that I can make is just the simple truth. Now, if I had been the old Major, I would have sworn with a light heart. I would have thought no more of knifing him than of smoking a cigar. But it's cursed hard that I should be lagged over this young Sholto, with whom I had no quarrel whatsoever. You are under the charge of Mr. Athelney Jones of Scotland Yard. He is going to bring you up to my rooms, and I ask you a true account of the matter. You must make a clean breast of it, for if you do, I hope that I may be of some use to you. I think I can prove that the poison acts so quickly that the man was dead before you even reached the room. That he was, sir. I never got much return in my life when I saw him grinning at me, head on his shoulders, if I climbed through the window. It fairly shit me, sir. I'd have half killed Tonga for it if he had not scrambled off. That was how he came to leave his club, and some of his darts, too, as he tells me, which I dare say helped to put you on our track. Though, how you kept on it is more than I can tell. I don't feel no malice against you for it, but it does seem a queer thing, he added with a bitter smile, that I, who have a fair claim to $500,000 of money, should spend the first half of my life building a backwater in the Adamans, and am like to spend the other half digging drains in Dartmoor. It was an evil day for me when I first clapped eyes upon the merchant Acmets, since it had to do with agri-treasure, which never brought anything but a curse yet upon the man who owned it. To him, it brought murder. To Major Sholto, it brought him fear and guilt. To me, it has meant slavery for life. At this moment, Anthony Jones thrust his face and shoulder into my tiny cabin. Quite the family party, he remarked. I think I shall have pour that flask, Holmes, while I think we may be congratulating each other. Pity we didn't take the other alive, but there was no choice. I say, Holmes, you must confess that you cut it rather fine. It was all we could do to overhaul her. All is well that ends well, said Holmes. But I certainly did not know that the Aurora was such a clipper. Smith says that she's one of the fastest launches on the river. Neither did he, cried our prisoner. Not a word. I chose his launch because I heard that he was a flyer. We told him nothing, and we paid him well, and he was to get something handsome if we reached our vessel, the Esmeralda, at Gravesend, outward bound for the Brazils. Well, if he has done no wrong, we shall see that no wrong comes to him. If we are pretty quick in catching our men, we are not so quick in condemning them. It's amusing now to see the consequential Jones was already beginning to give himself airs of the strength of the capture. The slight smile which played over Sherlock Holmes's face, I could see that the speech had not been lost upon him. We will be at Vauxhall Bridge presently, said Jones. We shall land you, Dr. Watson, with the treasure box. I need hardly tell you that I am taking a very grave responsibility upon myself in doing this. It is most irregular, but of course the arrangement is not. I must, however, as a matter of duty, send an inspector with you, since you have so valuable a charge. Drive, no doubt? Yes, I shall drive. It is a pity there is no key, that we may make an inventory. We will have to break it open. Where is the key, my man? At the bottom of the river, says Small shortly. There was no use of you giving unnecessary trouble. We've had work enough already through you. However, Doctor, I need not warn you to be careful. Bring the box back with you to Baker Street rooms. You'll find us there, and on our way to the station. We landed near Vauxhall with a heavy iron box, and with the buff, genial inspector as my companion. A quarter of an hour's drive brought us to Mrs. Cecil Forrester's. The servant seemed surprised at so late a visitor. Mrs. Cecil Forrester was out for the evening, she explained, and was likely to be very late. Miss Morstan, however, was in the drawing room, so to the drawing room I went, box in hand, leaving the obliging inspector in the cab. She was seated at the open window, dressed in some sort of white diaphanous material, with a little touch of scarlet at the neck and wrist. The soft light of the shaded lamp fell upon her as she leaned back in a basket chair, playing over the sweet, grave face, tinting with dull metallic sparkle rich coils of her luxuriant hair. One white arm and hand drooped over the side of the chair, and her whole pose was a figure that spoke of absorbing melancholy. At the sound of my footfall, she sprang to her feet, however, and a bright flush of surprise and of pleasure colored her pale cheeks. "I had the cab drive up," she said. "I thought that Mrs. Forrester was home for an early evening, but I never dreamed that it might be you. What news have you brought me?" "I have brought something better than news," he said, pulling out the box on the table and speaking jovially and boisterously, though my heart was heavy within me. "I have brought you something which is worth all the news of the world. I have brought you a fortune." She glanced at the iron box. "Is that the treasure, then?" she asked, coolly enough. "Yes, this is the great Agra treasure. Half of it is yours, and half of it is Thaddeus Sholto's. You'll have a couple 100,000 each. Think of that. An annuity of 10,000 pounds. There will be a few richer young ladies in England. Is it not glorious?" I think that I must have been rather overacting my delight, and that she detected a hollow ring in my congratulations, for I saw her eyebrows rise a little, and she glanced at me curiously. "If I have it," she said, "I owe it to you." "Oh, no," I answered. "Not to me, but to my friend Sherlock Holmes. With all the will in the world, I would never have followed up such a clue which has taxed even his analytical genius. As it was, we very nearly lost it in the last moment." "Pray sit down and tell me all about it, Dr. Watson," she said. I narrated briefly what had occurred since I had seen her last. Holmes's new method of search, the discovery of the Aurora, the appearance of Thunley Jones, our expedition in the evening, wild chase down the Thames. She listened with parted lips and shining eyes to my recital of my adventures. When I spoke of the dart which had so narrowly missed us, she turned so white that I feared that she was about to faint. "It is nothing," she said, as I hastened to pour her out some water. "I'm all right again. It was a shock to me to hear that I'd placed my friends in such horrible peril." "That is all over," I answered. "It was nothing. I will tell you no more gloomy details. Let us turn to something brighter. There is the treasure. What could be brighter than all that? I got to leave to bring it with me, thinking that it would interest you to be the first to see it." "It would be of greatest interest to me," she said. There was no eagerness in her voice, however. It had struck her, doubtless, that it might seem ungracious upon her part to be indifferent to the prize which had cost so much to win. "What a pretty box," she said, stooping over it. "This is Indian work, I suppose?" "Yes, it is Benares metalwork." "And so heavy," she exclaimed, trying to raise it. "Box alone must be of some value. Where's the key?" "Small threw it into the Thames," I answered. "I must borrow Mrs. Forrester's poker." There was a front of thick and heavy hasp, brought in the image of a sitting Buddha. Under this, I thrust the end of the poker and twisted it outward as a lever. The hasp sprang open with a loud snap. With trembling fingers, I flung back the lid. We both stood gazing in astonishment. The box was empty. No wonder it was so heavy. The ironwork was 2/3 of an inch thick all around. It was massive, well made, and solid, like a chest constructed to carry things of great price. But no one shred or crumb of metal or jewelry lay within it. It was absolutely and completely empty. Treasure is lost, said Miss Morrison calmly. I listened to the words and realized what they meant. A great shadow seemed to pass from my soul. I did not know how this agri treasure had weighed me down until now that it was finally removed. I was selfish, no doubt, disloyal, wrong, but I could realize nothing save for the golden bear was done from between us. Thank God! I ejaculated from my very heart. She looked at me with a quick and questioning smile. Why do you say that? She asked. Because you are within my reach again, I said, taking her hand. She did not withdraw it. Because I love you, Mary, as truly as ever a man loved a woman. Because this treasure, these reaches, I sealed my lips. Now they're gone, I can tell you how I love you. That is why I said, thank God. Say, thank God, too, she whispered as I drew her to my side. Whoever had lost the treasure knew that night that I had gained one. That's who our library scholar would note Mary Worston is one of Watson's wives. Spoiler. Okay. One chapter left. Chapter 12. A Strange Story of Jonathan Small. A very patient man was that inspector in the cab, for it was a weary time before I rejoined him. His face clouded over when I showed him the empty box. There goes my reward, he said gloomily. Where there is no money, there is no pay. This night's work would have been worth a tenner each to Sam Brown and the treasure of it. Mr. Thaddeus Sholto is a rich man, I said. He will see that you are rewarded. Treasure or no. The inspector shook his head despondently, however. It's a bad job, he repeated. And so Mr. Althemlin Derms will think. His forecast proved to be correct, for the detective looked blank enough when I got to Baker Street and showed him the empty box. They had only just arrived, Holmes, the prisoner, and he, for they had changed their plans so far as to report themselves at the station upon the way. My companion lounged in his armchair with his usual listless expression, while Small sat stolidly opposite him with a wooden leg cocked over the saddle. As I exhibited the empty box, he leaned back in the chair and laughed aloud. "This is your doing, Small," said Sam Jones angrily. "Yeah, I've put it away where you shall never lay a hand on it," he cried exultantly. "It is my treasure, and if I can't have the loot, I'll darn take good care that no one else does. I tell you that no living man has any right to it, unless it is three men who are in the Ottoman convict barracks and myself. I now know that I cannot have any use of it, and I know that they cannot. I've acted all through them as much as I can myself. It's been a sign of the fall with us always. Well, I know that they would have had me do just what I've done, throw the treasure into the Thames, rather than go to kith or kin, Sholto or Morstan. It was not to make them rich that it did for Atchment. To find the treasure where the key is, and where little Tonga is. When I saw you at lunch, you must catch us, so put the loot away in a safe place. There are no rupees for you in this journey." "You are deceiving us, Small," said Eltham sternly. "If you had wished to throw the treasure into the Thames, it would have been easier for you to have thrown the box and all." "Easier for me to throw and easier for you to recover," answered the shrewd sidelong. "That man that was clever enough to hunt me down is clever enough to pick an iron box from the bottom of the river. Now that they are scattered all over 5 miles or so, it may be a harder job. It went to my heart to do it, so I was half mad when you came up with us. However, there's no good grieving over it. I've had ups in my life, and I've had downs. But I've learned to not cry over spilled milk." "This is a very serious matter, Small," said the detective. "If you had helped justice instead of thwarting it in this way, you would have had a better chance at your trial." "Justice?" snarled the ex-convict. "A pretty justice? Whose loot is this, if not ours? Where is the justice that I should have to give up all those that have never earned it? Look how I have earned it. 20 long years in that fever-ridden swamp, all day at work under the mangrove tree, all night chained up in filthy convict huts, bitten by mosquitoes, racked with ague, bullied by every cursed black-faced policeman who loved to take it out of a white man. That was how I earned that Agra treasure. You talk to me of justice because I cannot bear to feel that I have paid this price only to another may enjoy it. I would rather swing a score of times or have one of Tonga's darts in my hide than live in a convict cell and feel that another man is in his ease in a palace with the money that should have been mine." Small had dropped his mask of stoicism, and all this came out in a wild whirl of words, while his eyes blazed and his handcuffs clanked together in the impassioned movement of his hands. I could understand, and I saw the fury and the passion of the man, that no groundless and no unnatural terror which was possessed of Major Sholto when he first learned that the injured convict was upon his track. "You forget that we know nothing of all this," said Holmes quietly. "We have not heard your story, and we cannot tell how far justice may originally have been on your side." "Well, sir, you have been very plain spoken to me, though I can see that I have you and think that I have these bracelets on my wrists. Still, I bear no grudge for that. It is all fair and above board. If you still want to hear my story, I have no wish to hold it back. What I say to you is God's truth, every word of it. Thank you. You can put up the glass beside me here, and I'll put my lips to it as if I am dry. I'm a Worcestershire man myself, born near Persia. I dare say you would find a heap of smalls living there now if you were to look. I've often thought of taking a look around there, but the truth is that I was never much of credit to my family. But I doubt they would be so very glad to see me. They're all steady chapel going folks, small farmers, well known and respected over the countryside, while I was always a bit of a rover. Yes, we get flashbacks. At last, however, when I was about 18, I gave them no more trouble, for I got into a mess over a girl. I could only get out of it again by taking the Queen's shilling and joining the 3rd Buffs, which was just starting for India. I wasn't destined to do much soldiering, however. I just got past the goose step and learned to handle my musket when I was a fool enough to go swimming in the Ganges. Lucky for me, my company sergeant, John Holder, was in the water at the same time, and he was one of the finest swimmers in the service. The crocodile took me, just as I was halfway across, nipped right off my leg as clean as the surgeon could have done it, just above the knee. With that, the shock and loss of blood, I fainted, and should have been drowned if Holder had not caught hold of me and paddled for the bank. I was 5 months in the hospital over it, and when at last I was able to limp out of it, and the timber toe was strapped to my stump, I found myself invalidated out of the army and unfitted for any active occupation. I was, as you can imagine, pretty down on my luck at this time, for I was a useless cripple, though not yet in my 20th year. However, my misfortune soon proved to be a blessing in disguise. A man named Abel White, who was come out of there as an indigo player, wanted an overseer to work for his coolies and to keep them out of the work. He happened to be a friend of our colonel's who had taken an interest in me since the accident. To make a long story short, the colonel recommended me strongly for the post, and as the work was mostly been done on horseback, my leg was no great obstacle, for I had enough knee left to get a good grip on the saddle. What I had to do was to ride over the plantation, keep an eye on the men as they worked, and report to idlers. Pay was fair, I had comfortable quarters, and although I was content to spend the remainder of my life Indian planning, Mr. Abel White was a kind man and would often drop into a little shanty and smoke a pipe with me. For white folk out here feel their hearts warm to each other when they never do. Well, I was never in luck's way long. Suddenly, without a note of warning, a great mutiny broke upon us. 1 month India lay still and peaceful to all appearance, as Surrey or Kent. The next, there were 200,000 black devils let loose, and the country was a perfect hell. Of course, you know all about it, gentlemen, a deal more than I do. Very like, since reading is not out of my line. I only know what I saw with my own eyes. Our plantation was at a place called Motra, near the border of the northwest provinces. Night after night, the whole sky was alight with the burning bungalows. Day after day, with small companies of Europeans passing through the state with their wives and children, on their way to Agra, where were the nearest troops. Mr. Abel White was an obstinate. He had it in his head that the affair had been exaggerated, and that it would be, well, he'd blow over as soon as it had sprung up. There he sat on his veranda, drinking whiskey pegs and smoking cheroots, while the country was in a blaze about him. Of course, we was struck by the country, and him and Dawson, who, with his wife, used to do the bookwork and the managing him. Well, one fine day the crash came. I had been away on a distant plantation and was riding slowly home in the evening, when my eye fell upon something all huddled together at the bottom of Steep Knoll. I rode down to see what it was, and the cold struck me through the heart, and I found it was Dawson's wife, all cut into ribbons and half eaten by jackals. Dogs. A little farther up the road, Dawson himself was found lying on his face, quite dead, with an empty revolver in his hand, and four set boys lying across each other in front of him. I reined up my horse, wondering which way I should turn, but at that moment I saw thick smoke curling up from Abel Whitehouse's bungalow, and the flames beginning to burst through the roof. I knew then that I could do my employer no good, but would only throw my own life away if I meddled in the matter. From where I stood, I could see hundreds of Blackfeet, with their red coats still on their backs, dancing and howling around in the burning house. Some of them pointed at me, and a couple of bullets sang past my head. So I broke away in the paddy fields and found myself late and safe in the walls of Angra. As it proved, however, there was no great safety here either. The whole country was up like a swarm of bees. Wherever the English could collect their little bands, they just had the ground that their guns commanded. Everywhere else, they were helpless fugitives. It was a fight for the millions against the hundreds, and the cruelest part of it was that these men that fought against, horse, foot, and gunners, were our own picked troops, whom we had taught and trained, handling our own weapons and blowing our own bugle balls. At Agra, there were the 3rd Bengal Bolsters, some 6, and 2 troops of horse, and a battery of artillery. A volunteer corps of clerks and merchants had been formed, and this I joined, wooden leg and all. We went out to meet the rebels at Strawhurge early in July, and we beat them back for a time, but our powder gave out to fall back upon the city. Nothing but the worst news came to us from every side, which is not to be wondered at. For if you look up the map, you will see that we were right in the heart of it. Lucknow is rather better than 100 miles to the east. Kanpur is about as far to the south. From every point in the compass, there was nothing but torture, murder, and outrage. The city of Agra is a great place, swarming with fanatics and fierce devil worshippers of all sorts. Our handful of men were lost among the narrow, winding streets. Our leader moved across the river then, therefore, and took up his position at the old fort of Agra. I don't know if any of you gentlemen have ever read anything about that old fort. It is a very queer place. The queerest that ever I was in. And I have been in some rum corners. First of all, it is enormous in size. I should think that the enclosure must be acres and acres. There is a modern part which took all our garrisons, women, children, stores, and everything else. Plenty of rooms over where nobody goes, and which is given it to scorpions and centipedes. It is all full of great deserted halls and winding passages, and long corridors twisting in and out, so that it's easy for folk to get lost in. For this reason, it was seldom that anyone went into it, though now and again a party with torches might go exploring. The river washes along in front of the old fort and so protects it, but on its sides and behind there are many doors. These had to be guarded, of course, and the old quarter, as well as which actually held our troops. We were short-handed, with hardly enough men to man the angles of the building and to serve the guns. It was impossible for us, therefore, to station a strong guard at every one of the innumerable gates. What we did was to organize a central guardhouse in the middle of the fort, to leave each gate under the charge of one white man, one or two natives. I was selected to take charge during certain hours of the night of a small isolated door upon the southwest side of the building. Two Sikh troopers were placed under my command, and I was instructed if anything went wrong to fire my musket, when I might rely upon him coming at once from the general guard. As the guard stood 200 paces away, however, and the space between us cut up the labyrinth and passages and corridors, I had great doubts as to whether they could arrive in time to be of any use in case of an actual attack. Well, I was pretty proud of having the small command given to me, since I was a raw recruit and a gang like that. For 2 nights I kept the watch of the Punjabis. They were tall, fierce-looking chaps, Mohammed Sain and Abdullah Khan by name, both old fighting men, who had borne arms against us in the Chilean Walla. They could talk English pretty well, but I could get a little out of them. They preferred to stand together and jabber all night their queer, sick lingo. For myself, I used to stand outside the gateway, looking down on the broad, winding river, on the twinkling lights of the great city. The beating of drums and the rattle of tom-toms and the yells and howls of the rebels, drunk with opium and with batang, were enough to remind us all night that our dangerous neighbors were just across the street. Every 2 hours, the officer of the night used to come around at all the points to make sure that all was well. The third night of my watch was dark and dirty, with a small driving rain. It was dreary work standing in the gates, hour after hour, in such weather. I tried again and again to make my Sikhs talk, but without much success. At 2 in the morning, the rounds passed and broke our for moments weariness of the nights. Finding that my companions would not be led into conversation, I took out my pipe and laid down my musket to strike a match. In an instant, the 2 Sikhs were upon me. One of them snatched my firelock up and leveled it at my head, while the other held a great knife to my throat and swore between his teeth that he would plunge it into me if I moved a step. My first thought was that these fellows were in league with the rebels, and that this was the beginning of an assault. If our door were in the hands of the sepoys, the palace must fall, and the women and children be treated as though they were conquered. Maybe you gentlemen think that I'm making out a case for myself, but I give you my word that when I thought of that, though I felt the point of the knife against my throat, I opened my mouth with the intention of giving a scream, if it was my last one, which might alarm the main guard. These men who held me seemed to know my thoughts, for even as I braced myself to it, he whispered, "Don't make a noise. The fort is safe enough. There are no rebel dogs on this side of the river." There was a ring of truth in what he said, and I knew that if I raised my voice, I was a dead man. I could read it in the fellow's brown eyes. I waited, therefore, in silence, to see what it was they wanted from me. "Listen to me, Sahib," said the taller and fiercer pair, the one whom they called Abdullah Khan. "You must either be with us now, must be silenced forever. The thing is too great a one for us to hesitate. Either your heart and soul with us on your oath on the cross of the Christians, or your body this night shall be thrown into a ditch, and shall pass over to our brothers in the rebel army. There is no middle way. Which is it to be? Death or life? We can only give you 3 minutes to decide. For the time is passing and all must be done before the rounds come again. How can I decide? You have not told me what you want. But I tell you now that if it is anything against the safety of the fort, I will have no truck of it, so you can drive home your knife and welcome. It is nothing against the fort, he said. We only ask that to do what your countrymen come to this land for. We ask you to be rich. If you will be one of us this night, we will swear to you upon the naked knife, by the threefold oath which no Sikh has ever been known to break, that you shall have your fair share. The quarter of the treasure shall be yours. You can say no fairer. But what is this treasure then? I asked. I am ready to be rich as you can be, if you will but show me how it can be done. Swear that, by the bones of your father, by the honor of your mother, by the cross of your faith, to raise no hand and speak no word against us, either now or afterwards. I swear it, I answered, provided that the fort is not endangered. Then, my comrade, I will swear that you shall be porter of the treasure, which shall be divided equally among the four of us. There are but three, said I. No, Dost Akbar must have his share. We can tell the tale to you when we meet. Do stand at the gates, Muhammad Seen, and give notice of their coming. Thing stands thus, Sahib. I'll tell you because I know that you had oath binding on the fair deed, that we trust you. Had you been lying Hindu, those that swore by all the gods of their false temples, your blood would have been upon the knife, and your body shall be in the water. But the Sikh knows the Englishman. The Englishman knows the Sikh. Hearken, then, to what I have to say. There is a Raja in the northern provinces who has such wealth, though his lands are small. Much has come to him from his father, and still more he has set by himself, for he is of a low nature, and hoards his gold rather than spend it. When the troubles broke out, he would be friends with both the lion and the tiger. The Sope, the Khan's Raj. Soon, however, it seems to him that the white man's day has come, for though all the land he could not hear anything but of their death and their overthrow, yet, being a careful man, made such plans that, come what might, half at least of his treasure should be left to him. That which was in gold and silver he kept by him in vaults of his palace, but the most precious stones and the choicest pearls that he has had put into an iron box, and sent it by a trusty servant who, under the guise of a merchant, should take it to the fort of Agra, where to lie until the land is at peace. Thus, if the rebels won, he would have his money. If the company conquered, his jewels would be saved too. Having thus divided his horde, he threw himself into the cause of his sepoys, since they were strong upon his borders. By his doing this, mark you, Sahib, his property becomes the due of those who have true to their salt. This pretend the merchant who travels under the name of Ajmat is now in the city of Agra and desires to gain his way into the fort. He has with him as a traveling companion his foster brother, Dost Akbar, who knows his secret. Dost Akbar has promised this night to lead him to the side postern of the fort, and has chosen this one for his purpose. Here he will come presently, find the sign, myself waiting. The place is lonely, none shall know of his coming. The world shall know of his merchant Ahmed no more. The great treasure of the Raja shall be divided among us. What say you to it, Sahib? In Worcestershire, the life of man seems a great and sacred thing. But it is very different when there is fire and blood all around you. You have been used to meeting death at every turn. Whether Achmet, the merchant, lived or died was a thing as light as air. But at the talk about the treasure, my heart turned to it, and I thought of what I might do in the old country with it, and how my folk would stare when they saw their ne'er-do-well coming back with his pockets full of gold. I had, therefore, already made up my mind. Abdullah Khan, however, thinking that I was hesitant, pressed the matter more closely. Consider, Sahib, that if this man is taken by the commandant, he will be hung or shot, and his jewel is taken by the government, so that no man will be better. Now, since we do the taking of him, we should not do the rest as well. The jewels will be as well as any of the company's coffers. There will be enough to make every one of us rich men and great chiefs. No one can know about this matter. Here we are cut off from all. What could be better for the purpose? Say again, then, say, whether you are with us, or if we must look upon you as an enemy. I am with you, heart and soul. So it is well, said him that Firelight. See that we trust you for your word, like ours is not to be broken. We have now only to wait for my brother and the merchant. Does your brother know of what we will do? The plan is his. He has devised it. We will go to the gates and share the watch with Mahad Sign. The rain will still be falling heavily, for it is just to begin part of the wet season. Brown, heavy clouds were drifting across the sky, and it was hard to see more than stone cast. Deep moat lay in front of our door, but the water was in places nearly dried up, and it could easily be crossed. It was strange to see me standing there with these two wild Punjabis waiting for a man who was coming to his death. Suddenly my eye caught a glimpse of the shaded lantern at the other side of the minaret. It vanished among the mountain heaps and then reappeared again, slowly coming in our direction. There they are, I exclaimed. You will challenge him, Sahib, as usual. Spread up. Give him no cause for fear. Send us in. We shall do the rest while you stay guard. Have the lantern ready to uncover. We may be sure it's indeed. The light flickered onwards, stopping and advancing until we could see two dark figures upon the other side of the road. I let them scramble down the sloping banks, splash through the mire, climb halfway up to the gate before I challenged them. Who goes there? Said simply. Friends, came the answer. Covered my lantern through a flood of light upon it. The first was an enormous snake. The black beard swept clearly down its cummerbund. Outside of a show, I've never seen so tall of a man. The other was a little fat round fellow with a great yellow turban and a bundle on his head done up with a shawl. He seemed to be all the quiver for fear. His hands twitched as if he had been hurt, and his head kept turning to the left and to the right with two bright little twinkling eyes, like a mouse when he ventures out from its hole. It gave me chills to think of killing him. I thought of the treasure, my heart set as hard as flint against me. When he saw my white face, he gave a chirp of joy and came running up towards me. Your protection, Sahib, he panted. Your protection for an unhappy merchant Achmet. I've travelled across Rajputana, and I might seek shelter in the fort of Agra. I've been robbed and beaten and abused because I have been a friend of the company. It's a blessed night, this, when you see I am much more in safety. I and my poor possessions. What have you in the bundle? I asked. An iron box, he answered, which contains one or two little family matters which are of no value to others, but which I should not be sorry to lose. Yet I am not a beggar, and I shall reward you, young Sahib, your governor also, if you will give me the shelter I ask. I could not trust myself to speak longer with the man. The more I looked at his fat, frightened face, the harder did it seem that he would slay him in cold blood. It was best we got it over. Take him to the main guard, said I. 2-6 closing one behind me on either side, and the giant walked behind while they marched in through the great dark gateways. Never was a man so compassed around with death. I remained at the gates, flinching. I could hear the unmeasured tramp of their footsteps sounding through the lonely corridors. Suddenly it ceased, and I heard voices and a scuffle with the sound of blows. A moment later there came, to my horror, a rush of footsteps coming in my direction, the loud breathing of a running man. I turned my lantern down the long straight passage, and there was the fat man, running like the wind with a smear of blood across his face. And close at his heels, bounding like a tiger, great black-bearded Six, with a knife flashing in his hand. I have never seen a man run so fast as that little merchant. He was gaining on the Six, and I could see that if he once passed me, got to open air, he could save himself yet. My heart softened for him, but again the thought of the treasure turned me hard and bitter. Cast my firelock between his legs as he raced past, rolled over twice like a shot rabbit. Ere he could stagger to his feet, and the Six was upon him, buried his knife twice in his side. Man never uttered a moan, nor moved a muscle, but lay where he had fallen. I think myself that he may have been broken his neck with the fall. You see, gentlemen, that I am keeping my promise. I am telling you every word of the business, just exactly as it happened, whether it is in my favor or not. He stopped. He held out his manacled hands for some whiskey and water, which Holmes had brewed for him. For myself, I confess that I had now convinced the most horror of the man, not only for his cold-blooded business in which he had been concerned, even more for the somewhat flippant and careless way in which he narrated it. Her punishment was in store for him. I felt that he might expect no sympathy from me. Sherlock Holmes and Jones sat there with their hands upon their knees, deeply interested in the story, but the same disgust written upon their faces. You may have observed it, for there was a touch of defiance in his voice and the manner in which he proceeded. It was all very bad, no doubt, he said. I should like to know how many fellows in shoes who have had their refused to share this loot when they knew that they would have had their throats cut for the pains. Besides, it was my life, and when this was over, if it got out, the whole business would come to light. I should have been court-martialed and shot, as likely as not. For people were not that lenient at a time like this. Go on with your story, said Holmes shortly. Well, we carried him in, Abdullah, Akbar, and I. Fine weight he was, too, for all that he was short. Muhammad's son was left to guard the door, and we took him to a place which Six had already prepared. It was some distance off, where a winding passage leads to an empty hall. Brick walls, which were crumbling to pieces. The earth floor had sunk in at one place, making a natural grave. So we left Ahmed to the merchant there, having him covered first with loose stones. This done, we all went back to the treasure. It lay where he had dropped it, and when he was first attacked. The box was the same one that now lies upon your table. The key was strung by a silken cord to that carved handle upon the top. We opened it, and in the light of the lantern gleamed upon a collection of gems as such I have read and thought about as a little lad in Persia. It was blinding to look upon. When I had feasted our eyes, we took them all out and made a list of them. There were 143 diamonds in the first water, including one which has been called, I believe, the Great Mogul, which is said to be the second largest stone in existence. Then there were 97 fine emeralds, 170 rubies, some of which, however, were small. There were 40 carbuncles, 210 sapphires, 61 agates, and a great quantity of brilliant onyxes, cat's eyes, turquoise, and other stones. The very names of which I didn't know at the time, though I have become more familiar with them since. Besides this, there were nearly 300 very fine pearls, 12 of which were set in gold coronets. By the way, last had been taken out of the chest, and were not there when I recovered it. After we had counted the treasure, we put them back into the chest and carried them to the gateway to show them to Muhammad's sign. Then we solemnly renewed our oaths to stand by each other and be true to our secret. We agreed to conceal our loot in a safe place until the country should be at peace again, then divide it equally among ourselves. There was no use dividing it at present, for if gems of such value were found upon us, it would cause suspicion. And there was no privacy in the fort, nor any other place we could have kept them. We carried the box, therefore, into the same hall where we had buried the body. There, under certain bricks in the well-preserved wall, we made a hollow, put our treasure at the bottom, for we had sworn that it would always act for us, so that none might take advantage. This was an oath that I can never put out of my heart, and I swear that I have never broken it. Well, there's no use of my telling you, gentlemen, what came of any. After Wilson took Delhi and Sir Cohen relieved Lucknow, the back of the business was broken. Fresh troops were pouring in, and Nana Sahib made himself scarce over the frontier. A flying column of Colonel Gathard came around the Agra and cleaned up the pandies away from us. Peace seemed to be settling upon the country, and we four might safely go off with a share of the plunder. In a moment, however, our hopes were shattered by our being arrested for the murders of Ahmed. It came about this way. When the Rajaja put his jewels in the hands of Ahmed, he did it because he knew that he was a trusty man. There's suspicions folk in the east, however. So what does Raj do? The second, even more trusty servants set him to play a spy upon the first. The second man was ordered never to let Ahmed out of sight. He followed him in shadow. We went after him that night and saw him pass through the doorway. Of course, he thought that he had taken refuge at the fort and applied for admission there himself the next day. But he could find no trace of Ahmed. It seemed to be so strange that he spoke about the sergeant of guides. It brought it to the ears of the commander. And through search was quickly made, and the body was discovered. Thus, at the very moment that we thought all was safe, we were all four seized and brought to trial on charge of murder. Three of us because we had held the gate that night, and the fourth because he was known to have been in the company of his murderous man. Not a word about the jewels came out of the trial. The Rajah had deposed and driven out of India, so no one had ever particularly interested in them. The murderer, however, was clearly concerned upon. It was certain that we must all take concern in it. The 36 got penal servitude for life, and I was condemned to death, though my sentence was afterwards commuted into the same as the others. It was a rather queer position that we found ourselves in then. There were all four of us by the leg, and by curious little chance of ever getting out again. While we each held secrets that might have put us each in the palace if we had only made use of it. It was enough to make a man eat his heart out to have us stand and kick cuff of every petty jack in office. To have rice to eat and water to drink, when a gorgeous fortune was ready for him outside, just waiting to be picked up. Might have driven me mad, but I was always a pretty stubborn one, so I just held on and bided my time. At last it seemed to me to have come. I was changing from Agra to Madras, and from there to Blair Island to the Adamant. There was very few white convicts at the settlement, and as I was behaved well from the first, I soon found myself a sort of privileged person. I was given a hut in Hope Town, which was a small place on the slopes of Mount Harriet, and I was left pretty much to myself. It was a dreary, fever-stricken place, and all beyond our little clearings was infested with mild, cannibal natives who were ready enough to blow a poisoned dart at us if they saw a chance. There was digging and ditching and yam planting and a dozen other things to be done, so we were busy enough all day, though in the evening we had little time to ourselves. Among other things, I learned to dispense drugs for a surgeon, picked up a smattering of his knowledge. All the time, I was on the lookout for a chance to escape, but it is hundreds of miles from any other land. There is little to no wind in the seas, so it was a terribly difficult job to get away. The surgeon, Dr. Somerton, was a fast, sporting young chap. The other young officers would meet in his rooms and play cards. The surgery, where I used to make up my drugs, was next to his sitting room. with a small window between us. Often, if I felt lonesome, I would turn out the lamp surgery, and then, standing there, I could hear their talk and watch their play. I'm fond of a hand at cards myself. It was almost as good as having one to watch the others. There was Major Sholto, Captain Mostyn, and Lieutenant Bromley Brown, who were all in command of the native troops, and there was a surgeon himself, and two or three prison officials, crafty old hands who played a nice, sly, safe game. Little snug little party. Well, there was one thing which very soon struck me, and that was that the soldiers used always to loosen the civilians to the wind. Mind, I don't say that there was anything unfair, so as it was. Prison chaps had done little else than play cards ever since they had been adults, and they knew each other's game to the point, while the others just played to pass time and threw their cards down anyway. Night after night, soldiers got what more toward, and the poorer they got, the more keen they were to play. Major Sholto was the first hardest hit. He used to play in the notes and gold at first, but soon it came to notes of hand for big sums. He sometimes would win a few deals just to give him heart, and then the luck would set him against him more than ever. All day he would wonder about the blackest thunder. He took to drinking a deal more than was good for him. One night he lost even more heavily than usual. I was sitting at my hut when he and Captain Morrison came stumbling along into the quarters. They were bosom friends, those two, were never far apart. The Major was raving about his losses. It's all up, Morstan, he was saying as they passed by my hut. I shall have to send in my papers. I'm a ruined man. Nonsense, old chap, said the other, slapping him across the shoulder. I've had a nasty facer myself, but that was all I could hear. It was enough to get me thinking. A couple days later, Major Shorter was strolling upon the beach, and I took a chance of speaking to him. I wish to have your advice, Major, said I. Well, Small, what is it? He asked, taking his chum shoe from his lips. I wanted to ask you, sir, I said. Who is the proper person to whom hidden treasure should be handed over? I know where 500,000 worth lies, and as I cannot use it myself, I thought perhaps the best thing that I could do was to hand it over to the proper authorities, and then perhaps they could get my sentence shorted for me. 500,000, Small, he gasps, looking hard at me as if it was in earnest. Quite that, sir, in jewels and pearls. It lies there ready for anyone. And the queer thing about it is that the real owner is outlawed and can't hold property, so that it belongs to the first comer. To government, Small, stammered. To government. But he said in a halting fashion, and I knew in my heart that I got him. You think then, sir, that I should give the information to the Governor General? I said quietly. Well, then, sir, that I should give the information. Well, you must not do anything rash, or that you might repent. Let me hear all about it, Small. Give me the facts. I told him the whole story with small changes, so that he would not identify the places. When I had finished, he stood stock still and full of thought. I could see by the twitch of his lip that there was a struggle going on within him. This is a very important matter, Small, he said at last. I must not say a word to anyone about this, but I shall see you soon again. 2 nights later, he and his friend Captain Morrison came into my hut in the dead of the night. Then, I want you to let Captain Morrison hear that story from your own lips, Small, said he. I repeated as I had told it before. It rings true, said he. It's good enough to act. Morrison nodded. Look here, Small, said the Major. We have been talking it over, a friend and I here, and we have come to the conclusion that this secret of yours is hardly a government matter. After all, but is a private matter of your own, which, of course, you have the power of disposing of as you wish. Now the question is, what price would you ask for it? We might be inclined to take it up, and at least look into it, if we could agree to terms. He tried to speak in a cool, careless way, but his eyes were shining with expression. Why, it's that, gentlemen, I answered, trying also to be cool, but feeling as excited as he did. There's only one bargain which a man in my position can make. I shall want you to help me to my freedom, and help my 3 companions to theirs. We shall take you into partnership, and give you a fifth share divided between you. Said. A fifth share? That is not very tempting. It would come to 50,000 apiece, said I. But how can we gain your freedom? You know very well that you ask is an impossibility. Nothing of the sort, I answered. I have thought it all out in the last detail. The only bar to escape is that we can get no boat fit for the voyage, no provisions to last the Yolls of Calcutta or Madras, which would serve our turn well. Do you bring one over? We shall engage to get order by night, and if you drop us in the part of the Indian coast, you will have done your part in the bargain. If there were only one, he said. None or all, I answered. We have sworn it. The 4 of us must always act together. You see, Morrison, he said, Small is a man of his word. He does not flinch from his friends. I think we may very well trust him. It's a dirty business, the other answered. Yet, as you say, money will serve our missions. Well, Small, said the Major, we must, I suppose, try and meet you. We must first, of course, test the truth of your story. Tell me where the box is hid. I shall get leave of absence and go back to India, the leaf boat, to inquire into the affair. Not so fast, said I. Holders, he got hot. I must have the consent of my 3 comrades. I tell you that it's 4 or none of us. Nonsense, he said. What have 3 black fellows to do with our government? Black or blue, I said. They are in with me, and we all go together. Well, the matter ended by a second meeting, which the sign Abdullah Khan and Dost Akbar were all present. We talked the matter over, and at last we came to an agreement to provide the officers with charts of the parts of the Abbey Fort and mark on the place on the wall where the treasure was hid. Major Sholto was to go test our theory. If he found the box, he was to leave it there, to send out a small yacht devised for the voyage, which was to lie off the Rutland Island, and to which we were to make our way and finally return to his duties. Captain Morrison was then to apply for leave of absence. Meet us at Agra. There we were to have a final division of the treasure, taking the Major's share as well as his own. At this, we sealed all, solemn oaths that the mind could think of, the lips utter. I sat up all night with paper and ink, and in the morning I had 2 charts already, signed with the sign of the four, that is, Abdullah, Akbar, Muhammad, and myself. Well, gentlemen, I weary you with a long story, and I know that my friend Mr. Jones is impatient to get me safely stowed in Choki. I'll make it as short as I can. The villain Sholto went off to India, but he never came back again. Captain Morrison showed me his name. Some passengers in one of the mailboats very shortly afterwards. His uncle had died, leaving him a fortune, and he had left the army, yet he did not stoop to treat 5 men as he had treated us. Morrison went over to Agra shortly afterwards and found, as we expected, that the treasure was indeed gone. The scoundrel had stolen it without carrying out one of the conditions on which he had sold him the secret. From that day I lived only for vengeance. I thought of it day, I nursed it by night. It became overpowering, absorbing passion with me. I cared nothing for the law, nothing for the gallows. To escape, to track down Sholto, to have my hand on his throat, that I made one thought. Even the Agra treasure had come to be a smaller thing in my mind. Slaying Sholto. I've set my mind on many things in life, and never one which I did not carry out. But it was weary years before my time came. I have told you that I had not picked up something of medicine. One day, when Dr. Summerton was down with fever and was all adamant I was picked up by a convict gang in words. He was sick to death and had gone to a lonely place to die. I took him in hand, as venomous as a young snake, and after a couple of months I got him all right and able to walk. He took a kind of fancy to me then. I'd hardly go back to those woods, but was always hanging about in my huts. I learned the lingo from him that made him all the fonder of me. Tonga, for that was his name, was a fine boatman. He owned a big, roomy canoe of his own. When I found that he had devoted to me, do anything to serve me, I saw my chance to escape. I talked it over with him. He was to bring the boat over to certain heights of the old wharf, which was never guarded. There he was to pick me up. I gave him directions to the several gourds of water and lots of yams, coconuts, sweet potatoes. He was stanch and true to the promise. No man ever had a more faithful mate. The night named, he had his boat as a dwarf. As it chanced, however, there was 100 guards down there. Vile Pathan who was never mischance of insulting or injuring. Had always vowed vengeance. Now I had my chance. It was as if fate had placed him in a pay debt for him to the end. He stood on the bank with his back to me, his carbine on his shoulder. I looked about for some stone to beat out his brains. None. Then a queer thought came into my head. It showed me where I could lay my hand on his weapon. I sat down in the darkness and unstrapped my wooden leg. With 3 long hops I was on him, put his carbine to his shoulder. I struck him full, knocked the whole front of his skull. You can see the splint in the wood now where I hit him. We both went down together, for I could not keep my balance, but when I got up I found him lying by him. I made for the boat, and in an hour we were well out to sea. Tonga had brought all his earthly possessions with him, his arms and his gods. Among other things, he had a long bamboo spear and some adamant coconut matting, with which I made a sort of sail. For 10 days we were beating about, trusting to luck, and on the 11th we picked up by a trader which was going to Singapore, to Judah, with a cargo of Malay. They were a rum crowd, and Tonk and I were soon managed to settle down among them. They had one very good quality. They let you alone and asked questions. Well, if I were to tell you the adventures of my little chum and I went through, you would not thank me, for I'd have you here until the sun was shining. Here and there we drifted about the world, something always turning up to keep us from life. All the time, however, I never lost sight of my purpose. I would dream of Sholto at nights. 100 times I killed him in sleep. Alas, however, some 3 or 4 years ago, we found ourselves in England. I had no great difficulty in finding Sholto, and I set to work to discover whether he realized the treasure if he still had it. I made friends with someone who could help me. I for I don't want to get anyone else in the hole. And I soon found out that he still had the jewels. Then I tried to get him in many ways, but he was pretty sly. He always had two prize fighters besides his sons and his kitten Margaret guard. One day, however, I got word that he was dying. I hurried at once to the garden, mad that he'd slip out of my clutches like that. And looking through the window, I saw him lying on his bed with his two sons on either side of him. I'd have come through and taken my chance with the three men. Even when I looked at him, his jaw dropped. I knew that he was gone. I got into his room the same night, so I had searched his papers to see if there was any record where he had jewels. There was not a line, so I came away, bitter, savage as a man could be. Before I left, I bethought me that if I ever met my sick friends again, it would be in satisfaction to know that I had left some mark of our hatred. So I scrawled down the sign on the floor of us, and as it had been on the chart, and pinned it on his bosom. It was too much that he should be taken to the grave without some token from the man robbed and fooled. We earned our living at this time by exhibiting poor Tonga at fairs and other such places as Black Cannibal. He would eat raw meat and dance his war dance, so we always had a handful of pennies at the workday. I still heard all the news from Pondicherry Lodge, and for some years there was no news to hear, except that they were hunting for treasure. At last, however, came what we'd waited for so long. Treasure had been found. It was up at the top of the house in Mr. Bartholomew Sholto's chemical lab. So I came at once and had a look at the place. I could not see how with I was to make my way up to it. I learned, however, about the trapdoor in the roof, and also about Mr. Sholto's supper hour. It seemed to me that I could manage the thing easily through Tonga. I brought him with me to climb along over his waist. He could climb like a cat. As soon as he made his way to the roof, but as ill luck would have it, Bartholomew Sholto was still on his room. His cost. Tonga thought he had done something very clever in killing, for when I came up by the group, I found him strutting about, as proud as a peacock. Very much surprised when he was taken aback by what he had done with the rope. I cursed him being a little bloodthirsty imp. Took the treasure box and let it down, and then I slid down myself. having first left the sign of the fork on the table to show them that Jules had gone back to those right to them. Tonga then pulled up the rope to the window, made off the way he'd come. I don't know that I have anything else to tell you. I had heard the watermen speak of the speed of the launch and Aurora, and so I thought it would be a handicraft for our escape. Engage Mr. Smith, give him a big sum if he got us safe to a ship. He knew, no doubt, that there were some screw loose, but he did not want in our secrets. All this is truth. If I tell you, gentlemen, it is not to amuse you, for you have not done me a very good turn. It is because I believe the best defense I can make is just to hold back nothing. Let all the world know how badly I have myself served by Sholto, how innocent I am after the death of his son. A very remarkable account, said Sherlock Holmes. A fitting wind-up to an extremely interesting case. There is nothing at all new to me except the latter part of your narrative, except that you brought your own rope. That I did not know. By the way, I'd hoped that Tonga had lost all his darts, yet he managed to shoot one at us in the boat. He had lost all of them, sir, except the one which was still at his blowpipe at the time. Ah, of course. Besides, I had not thought of that. Is there any other point which you would like to ask about? Asked Conde affably. I think not. Thank you, I answered. Well, Holmes, said Athelin Jones, you're a man to be humoured, and well know that you're a connoisseur of crime. But duty is duty, and I have gone rather far in doing what you and your friend have asked. I shall feel more at ease when we have our storyteller here under safe lock and key. The cab still waits, and there are 2 inspectors downstairs. I'm much obliged to you both for your assistance. Of course, you will be wanted at the trial. Good night to you. Good night, gentlemen both, said Jonathan Small. You first, Small, laughed Larry Jones as he left the room. I'll take particular care that you don't club me with your wooden leg. Whatever you may have done with the genteel man, Adam Isles. Well, and there's the end of our little drama, remarked after we had sat down some time in silence. I fear that it may be the last investigation in which I shall have the chance of studying your methods. Miss Morstenen has done me the honor to accept me as a husband in perspective. He gave a dismal groan. I feel as much, he said. I cannot congratulate you, though. I was a little hurt. Have you any reason to be dissatisfied with my choice? I asked. Not at all. I think she is one of the most charming young ladies I have ever met, and might have been keen and almost useful in such work as we have been doing. She has a decided genius way. Witness the way in which she preserved that agro plan from all the other papers of her father. But love is an emotional thing. Whatever is emotion is opposed to that of true, cold reason, which I place above all things. I should never marry myself, lest I bias my judgment. I trust, I said, laughing, that my judgment may survive the ordeal. But you look weary. Yes, reaction is upon me already. I shall be as limp as a rag for a week. Strange, said I. How terms of what another man should call laziness alternate with your fits of splendid energy and vigor. Yes, he answered. There are in me the makings of a very fine loafer. and also a pretty spry sort of fellow. I often think of those old lines of old Goethe. Schad, dass der Jutta nur einen Wunsch aus der Schlucht, den zum bärtigen Mann vor und zum Schilfberg der Sof. By the way, I propose of this noble business. You see that they had, as I surmised, a confederate in the house, who could have been none other than Lao Lao, the butler. So Jones actually has an undivided honor of having caught one fish in his great net. The division seems rather unfair, I remarked. You have done all the work in this business. I get a wife of it. Jones gets the credit. Pray, what remains for you? For me, said Sherlock Holmes, there still remains the cocaine bottle. And he stretched his long white hand up for it. And thus ends the Sign of Fleet. It started and ended with Holmes reaching for cocaine. So I need to find some three. Oops, now my microphone's picking up thing. So, thank you everyone for listening to the old man grumble about his dear friend Sherlock Holmes. Honestly, when I was on this trip last week, I don't know how many times I was listening to Sherlock Holmes radio stories. I can't say that my voices weren't inspired by it. Because John Watson has always had a particular sound. But as things are, I should be very much looking and to see who we can raid for the which means finding out who exactly they are. She is reading never ending story. Let's see, what's the see dusk is on. Cat is wanting attention. What little cat? What you want, my baby girl? Let's see. Mm-hmm. You know, not really has any suggestions. Let's take it. What are you? Yeah. Any word suggestions? Anyone? Ron? That was my cat. That was my cat, Aria. She had to nose my microphone. It's a cute kid. Good cat. Okay. Bounce over this. Okay. Let's go to my dusk. So my forward message. Supposed to. Don't know why it didn't come up. Why are my raid messages not coming up? Oh well. We're gonna raid dusk. That's what we want. And have a good night, everyone. Time for sleep. Okay. Good night, everyone. Thanks for coming by.